Great.
So my name is Loretta Graceffo. I'm a senior at St. Peter's University, and to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the university, we're going to be interviewing people from our community about their history at St. Peter's. So, could you please say your name and also spell it?
Certainly. My name is Dr. Julie DiGioia, Digioia.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and we're excited to hear your story.
Happy to help. Thank you.
Can we talk by just can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
I was born and raised in Jersey City. I went to a Catholic school called St. Aloysius Academy, which was a parochial school for just for girls. And that was on Kennedy Boulevard by Lincoln Park. And I spent 12 years at St. Aloysius and had a wonderful experience with the Sisters of Charity. And I had a pretty good grounding in, I hate to use such politically correct term, but female power and women's issues. And it gave me a very excellent base to take on my future education as a cancer surgeon. So my parents, my dad was first generation immigrant. He was born in the United States, but his parents were immigrants. So he and my grandparents never went to school at all. They were very hardworking, faith-based, brilliant people, but they never were educated. They were peasants from southern Italy. So my dad ended up going to St. Peter's College and then to Georgetown Medical School. And he practiced in Jersey City for over 65 years. So he was really one of the heroes of my life. And his relationship and his gratitude to St. Peter's for giving him opportunities that never would have been imagined and back in Italy was really a profound influence on my choice to go to St. Peter's after St. Aloysius Academy. My mother was, her parents were from Ireland, came over during the potato famine, and she was also very faith-based and was a teacher for her entire career, raised six of us in Jersey City. And I am still exceedingly proud of both of my parents because they really gave me opportunities that, and my siblings, that ultimately was wonderful for our entire family. So I'm very grateful. I will say, though, that when I went to St. Peter's, I believe I was the fourth class or the fifth class to include females, because St. Peter's had been a traditionally male school, much like its feeder school, St. Peter's Prep, which remains a phenomenal high school for boys in Jersey City. And people come from all over to go to St. Peter's still. Unfortunately, St. Aloysius is no longer viable, which is really heartbreaking. But believe it or not, our alumni association is still very powerful. I talk to my 50-year reunion classmates just about every 2 weeks, so we have stuck together.
Wow.
And that's the thing about Catholic education. The classes were small enough that you really got
Mm-hmm.
close. You got close to people. So when I went into St. Peter's in 1969, it was a phenomenally incredible year. And we had the best rock and roll music, of course.
Hmm.
We had political turmoil with the Vietnam War. We had a tremendous social upheaval in terms of women's rights and civil rights. And, in Jersey City, which is still an epicenter of all things new and revolutionary, with a lot of smart people who have come from all over the world. It was a very exciting time. It's still exciting. I love Jersey City,
Me
but it was
too.
it was incredible. And we got involved with social justice and protests, peaceful, of course, but also a very vibrant time to be young in the United States during the 69 time of history. So I do recall there was a new major at that time called urban studies, and we didn't really know what urban studies was, but it was like very new and kind of fashionable, and all the
Hmm.
cool kids in the cafeteria were in urban studies. That was the coolest place to hang out. Of course, I was with my nerdy biology friends at the other end of but I was always intrigued by that major because I know it did a lot of women's things and, you know, black power and political, very vibrant, very in tune major at the time. And of course, as pre-meds, we were studying all the time like maniacs, but we felt that they had it really easy, which of course is not true, but that's what we felt. And I remember years later when I had a practice in Bayonne, one of the girls that was in that time, who was an urban studies major, came to me as a patient. I said, Maria, I know you guys were really cool, but what the heck did you ever do with that degree? What did you do with that crazy degree? And you know what she said to me?
I have no idea.
She said, we built the light rail. Now, the light rail
Wow.
is probably one of the greatest, advances in transportation for our
Yeah.
metropolitan area in forever, that plus the ferry. But the point is, the light rail has completely changed the complexion and the vibrancy of this metropolitan area. So how cool was that? That the kids
That's
that I thought were just like
amazing.
hanging out, having a good time, were actually building our future and changing our world. And that's the beautiful thing about not only being young, but being in a place where your ideas and your passions can flourish and people can
Mm-hmm.
be inspired in all different ways to change the world. And in terms of my major, again, pre-med was still very much male dominated. And again, when I went into surgery, it was almost totally male dominated.
Mm.
But I had been blessed by my own father and the men in my family to feel confident in my own abilities, and that really gave me a sort of a superpower to get through a lot of tough times. I will say though, the Jesuits were always very, very encouraging, and I think they saw women's education as a continuation of their mission, because again, women, and granted, we're not putting anything down against our men, are the heart of society. They raise the men and the women, and they also are the heart of the home. So having
Yeah.
educated women, no matter what path they choose, creates a stable Christian community and a stable human community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the decision to have girls come to the school must have been difficult for a lot of people at the time, but ultimately, by the time I graduated, I hate to say it, but most of the valedictorians were women. Okay. So
Wow, that didn't take long.
but the education we had in St. Peter's, I had some very legendary professors, just as my dad had. My dad had, I think he had Dr. Gannon, and they named Gannon Hall, the chemistry
I've
building
heard
there,
of him.
and he had a professor, Father Grusick, who was a Jesuit, who was legendary as being very, shall we say, demanding, and he suffered no fools, either gladly or otherwise. So he was a tough nut to crack, and he was tough on me, just like he was tough on everybody. But he never discouraged me. And when you're a student, no matter what age, whether you're in first grade or senior in college, people can discourage you without even knowing the influences that their words have. And I think we have to always remember, as you go forward and have students that you will be mentoring, interns or colleagues that are junior to you, you have to encourage, because you can stamp out a light in an otherwise gifted child if you don't watch your words. So Father Grusig was a legendary, tough guy, and he was. I'm very proud to have survived.
You made it.
But I think he had remembered my dad, and my dad was a very quiet
Wow.
guy, but he I guess he knew that I could get through it. Sometimes I didn't know, but he apparently knew
Yeah.
that. And the fact that he didn't throw me out of the class gave me confidence to go forward. But I had wonderful teachers in St. Peter's, and I had a broad education. A lot of science majors kind of like focus only on the science, and of course, science is everything to get into medical school. But I had a most brilliant professor. I'm sure you hear about him, is Dr. John Benson, who was a classics professor, who was truly legendary, and he was another dynamic, charismatic, but really kind and personally approachable man, who used to have sponsored trips to Italy. And I always regretted I never got to take one of his Italian trips. But ironically, I ended up going to medical school in Rome So I would try to translate all the monuments, which I didn't do too well at, but even the 4 years of Latin. But I loved him, and he just when he called my name, he'd say DiGioia, and he'd say that means happiness. I all of a sudden it felt great. He was another guy that I will never forget. And there were priests there, Father Buckley, who I loved dearly. He actually was on my altar when I got married.
Oh,
That you
wow.
feel, and Father Heavey, who had a very incredible history as, I think he was dean at Xavier, another boys' school in the city. But he, in his later years, was extraordinarily important as a spiritual guide to many of us, even after graduation. So I considered him a very close friend. And when my older son was going to college, he had recommended the University of Scranton, which is another Jesuit institution that John fit into beautifully, and still remains extraordinarily attached to that Jesuit tradition. And I'm grateful to so many of these priests and lay
Mhm.
teachers as well, that not just for me, but so many of my friends and colleagues remember with such passion. These were
Yeah.
really dynamic people that we were so blessed to have in our Jersey City little community. But I'm going on and on. You must have more questions. Yes.
Well, I was gonna say, since you were like one of the first classes with females, were there many like women professors at that time? Because I know we
You
have a lot
know,
now, but
I really, in the sciences, I don't recall, and I think I would have recalled. We had phenomenal science teachers. Another Dr. Alexander, who was a brilliant teacher of embryology. His class was so popular, and everybody loved this guy, and he was such a great teacher that all of us would get like ace our tests. And I was like, what are we going to do? Somebody has to do bad on this test. But we loved this guy so much. It was very difficult for him because you can't give a kid who got all the answers right a B. But
yeah.
he was great. I had Dr. Dunn. I think he was for calculus. I don't recall, unfortunately, because again, this was early time for pre-med.
Mhm.
So I think there were only two other women in the class. And because
Wow.
it was so male oriented, and we had like our lab partners, of course, it was almost entirely men. I know I struggled in calculus because even though my foundation in literature was very, very solid from St. Aloysius Academy, the nuns there were phenomenal teachers in terms of debating and literacy and punctuation and things like skills
Mhm.
like that. The math wasn't as strong. And again,
Yeah.
that was one of those times when, again, people tended to think more towards the secretarial teaching and nursing, perhaps. And whereas the lawyers and the doctors and the judges and the executives and the CEOs, that we were all percolating, okay, at that time.
Mhm.
And I think that the political situation at the time in terms of cultural identity was very, very exciting. So a lot of people were just starting to think what they could do.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't recall any science teachers as female when I was there. I know they had wonderful arts teachers and other, I'm sure, math teachers. I know math was a big female uh, major at that time. And a lot of women from St. Al's Academy when it got math degrees. So it's for some reason, I don't know, women seem to do well in math. They don't realize they do, but they do. And I think this is another stereotype that I think with the STEM programs, we're starting to emphasize including women from the beginning in these types of interests, because obviously these are universal passions, and there's a lot of interest now on female scientists and the NASA scientists and all the mathematicians and physicists as females that were really prominent but not well known. They weren't
Yeah.
well publicized at the time. But we have to always balance the fact that, and having gone to an all-girls school for 12 years and then going into a male-dominated college, and then of course a very male-dominated medical school and training program, do not sell our brothers down the street, because we have some extraordinary men who
Mhm.
who not only help us but serve as shining examples to what we can do. And
Yeah.
your role models have to include both men and women, because both are so important. We have to lose sight that we are all one human family.
Mhm.
And just like brothers and sisters, you can't
Yeah.
segregate ability and passion. So
Absolutely.
anyway, you may have another question for me. So no, I didn't know any science teachers who were women at the time.
Well, there's no shortage of amazing female professors now at St. Peter's, so
That's
it's
great.
cool to see that it's developed since then.
Right.
So was your father the one that like inspired you to go into medicine at that time? Because it's kind of an
Well,
unusual decision just based on.
it was, and it was very pivotal in our family because yes, he did. He was my really. I just love my dad. He was a brilliant man. Again, had gone to Rensselaer from Jersey City, and then went to St. Peter's, and then Georgetown Medical School. And I have a picture of my grandparents with their little babushkas and the mustache because they were in coal and ice in Jersey City, and they were at in front of the cherry trees outside of Georgetown when he graduated. And I'm just so proud of what he achieved. As a humble man, he was one of 9 children, all
Wow.
of whom were very smart people, but not all of whom went to college. They all
Mhm.
graduated from high school, and all of them were very, very bright people. One of my uncles basically an engineer at RCA,
Wow.
without formal training. So many teachers and attorneys have come out of our family. We have so many cousins, it's ridiculous. Many of whom as a matter of fact, my cousin Donald, who's probably the most powerful and respected criminal trial attorney and he was the president of the New Jersey Bar, was in my class at St. Peter's. And he,
Wow.
we graduated together. I have a picture of the two of us, and we're so young and we're so slim and we have our shining little faces. But I'm so proud of him, and he's proud of me, and we're proud of our base. He went on to Fordham, and he's a professor of the law school there, written books, really an icon in criminal defense. But we had a very smart family, but we needed education and the
Mhm.
tools to develop our careers. And St. Peter's, certainly for Donald and me, was an incredible experience in a positive way. So, and we still are very close. And again, it's wonderful to have community leaders with similar backgrounds because you're friends and you respect each other for what you achieved. And in medicine, St. Peter's has had an enormous number of medical graduates. So many of my father's colleagues and friends also went to St. Peter's. And in terms of my generation, I have a list of at least 20 of them that are practicing in the Hudson County area and in New York as well. My lab partner, Dr. Brunkhorst, was the chief of medical oncology at Lenox Hill. I mean, we had some really shining people here, and the medical docs that are still practicing, Dr. John Deducis, Dominic Kondo, Vinny Serafino, one of the best pediatricians in the world. My chief resident was Dr. Zali, who graduated from St. Peter's. Dr. Caprio was one of my residents. And when I went on to my surgical residency, a whole slew of St. Peter's graduates came in as my interns. They were my chiefs and they were my interns, and we've all grown up together. And again, our colleagues in internal medicine and GI, I mean, it was really at Medical Center was a glorious time for medicine because we had a phenomenal training staff. Our chief of surgery was a Georgetown graduate who went to school with my dad at Georgetown, and he was a thoracic
Wow.
surgeon. So we were like we are still a family. And even 45 years out, we still talk. And
That's
many of us,
amazing.
it's great. It's great. I could not be more grateful for an opportunity for us to still be friends and respect and honor each other, refer patients back and forth, refer family to each other because of the way we started, which is fantastic.
Mhm.
And even when I went to Rome to medical school, at least a dozen of our friends went over with me. So we then had a global St. Peter's experience
That's
and have
amazing.
anesthesiologists and surgeons and, neurologists. I mean, I don't want to bore everybody and take over the whole show, but it's done a good job. St. Peter's has done a great job helping us get to where we need to go, not only for ourselves, but for the community. And people have stuck around.
I had no idea about all these doctors who've come
Oh
from
my
St.
God. Oh
Peter's.
my
I'm so
God. We
glad
should
you mentioned that.
we should have Dr. Thompson, Dr. Rizzo, Dr. Rowe. I can name so many of them.
Wow.
Lost a few. Dr. Pitaro passed away. But the point is, we had fun there. I remember back in the early 70s, again, a great time for music. We had a pub on campus. I guess you don't do that anymore, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, it was
Really
the
cool.
Swan Song. It was a Swan Song, and it was a little like folk. People could play guitar there, and I believe I don't know if they served anything alcoholic, probably not. But at that time, believe it or not, the drinking age that had been 18 when I turned 18 went to 21, and then when I turned 21, it went back to 18 again. So I missed the alcohol haze, but we had a lot of fun, and they had a great drama department. I'm sure you still do. Argus Eyes. Do you still have
Hmm.
Argus Eyes?
Yep, we still have
That
Argus
was
eyes. They're still
fantastic
great.
people. One of my classmates from St. Aloysius, Nora Mae Ling, went on to be a Broadway star.
Wow.
We had, I mean, you really, it nurture the best in the arts as well as in the sciences, and being able to balance the two and be encouraged to explore other majors, because I think to be a doctor, you can't just know the science, you have to know the world. And I think
Hmm.
travel and exposure to the arts and to literature, I took a minor in American literature just because we had such great teachers, and
That's
I wanted to be
awesome.
in their classes. And I really, that meant a lot to me. It also made me able to read a really good book and not feel like I was cheating on my organic chemistry review. So it was great for me. So anyway, and I know you're supposed to be guiding this interview, darling. Anything else I can tell you?
I'm learning so much though. I'm really
Yeah,
enjoying.
well, it's the history of St. Peter's is the history of our city, and as it now is undergoing another renaissance, and whether that's following the World Trade Center, we had a huge input of New Yorkers, and now with all the pandemic challenges, we're having more of a exodus into New Jersey. So we're seeing the demographic shift in some ways, but it's still
Hmm.
a major urban hub, and Jersey City it still has it has such an amazing core of real people that are strivers, and that they
Yeah,
want to get
absolutely.
places and they want to do things, and they're very socially conscious, and that's important because if we have to learn anything from the way the United States has always been a beacon for people of every type and color and shade. I mean, Jersey City, I believe, is more diverse than any other city in the United
Hmm.
States. I think there's like 60 languages spoken here.
Wow.
And as you know, our culinary scene is incredible. We have the
Ugh,
best Italian, the best
amazing.
pizza in the world. We have everything, the best delis. I mean,
It's
heck,
true.
and we have down the shore when we need to get out of town for a while.
Hmm.
But we are really blessed, and blessed by the immigrant populations and the core Jersey City people that have built the city and
Yeah,
continue to live here. We have
special place.
challenges that we cannot ignore nor deny. We have too much poverty. We still have limited access to medical care, not
Hmm.
through the fact that we're not available, but through education. People need to know when to come out. They need more guidelines to how to get there. Just like St. Peter's was the guideline for us to get to places that we never knew or dreamed of.
Hmm.
People need to know how to get health care and how to get help,
Yeah.
and that's part of our mission. My mission is to increase breast cancer awareness. I myself am a survivor, and ironically had my own diagnosis years after I developed into a specialist in breast cancer. And it's ironic, but in a way another education for me to be a
Mm-hmm.
patient and to be a survivor. It gives me a real passion, and
Yeah.
and I'm happy to continue that by keeping my office. I have an office in Summit, but I've always had an office in Jersey City. And my brother practiced in Jersey City. My sister followed us to medical school. She's now an infectious disease specialist, and she went to St. Peter's,
Wow.
graduated in '76. But she was the leader of all of the COVID. And first of all, she started out in HIV care back in the '70s and '80s in San Francisco, and now she directed the COVID-19 program
Wow.
in
It's
not for San
amazing.
Francisco. So she's, all these St. Peter's people are doing a lot of great things. and important things. And again, my decision to worship my dad and want to be a doctor, they all followed me saying, if she could do it, I think we could do it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they did do it. So I'm so very proud of them.
It's so
But
inspiring to hear about people doing so many amazing things.
well, we are
You're
very,
part of a
very lucky.
community. And
But
I
I
love that
shouldn't,
you've stayed in Jersey City. That's really
it's
valuable.
hard for to get the girl out of Jersey City or get Jersey City out of the girl. My accent betrays me. Every time I have my office hours in Jersey City, I don't even understand myself when I come home because I'm speaking the language of my people. But it's a great, I'm proud of it. You know, there are many people that feel self-conscious. I figure, what the heck? You should be so proud to come from Jersey City
Yeah, it's an amazing
because
place.
I'm glad you
Very,
enjoy it.
I
Now, were you
love
a
it.
Jersey City girl too?
I'm from Clifton,
All
but
right.
I love Jersey City. I
Well,
totally
how
fell in
can
love
you
with
not? There's so
it.
much going on. It's a fun place to be. But
Absolutely.
I did want to use an opportunity to say that we are developing now a new cancer center on Journal Square. And I'm
Wow.
hopeful that I'll be able to communicate that with the St. Peter's University, family, because it's going to be another place where people can turn to for education, internships, learning opportunities. And I'd like to work closely with the nursing as well as the medical population of St. Peter's because we're neighbors and we should be able
Yeah.
to reach out and offer opportunities. Because if you can, my dad was such an influence because his office was in the house and I could go on cars and house calls with him. So I got to really know what he was doing. And more than
Mm-hmm.
that, I got to know how much people appreciated what he did. And
Mm.
sometimes we forget that. We think of healthcare as a commodity. It really is not. It's a relationship. And the more grounded you are in your community, you can see yourself doing things to help the community. And that's
Yeah.
why, I want to help as this center it's already in development. I want to make sure that we shout. It's like hiding your light under a bushel. We should never do that. You should shine.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Peter's has done a great job in letting people know how successful it is in terms of its educational goals. And
Yeah.
if I can help continue that, I will be happy to do that.
I love that. And I love that you have such like a community minded like vision of medicine. I feel like that's so valuable. Sometimes it's kind of looked at as like an individual.
You're right, but it is a village, and I'll tell you,
Mm-hmm.
my best advocates, my support group, which has every type of person you could ever imagine, which is what Jersey City is, and that's what makes it so wonderful. They can go into their communities and we can do talks in the temples, in the Baptist churches, in the schools, in any of these places where people gather so that the information, if it's personal, it's more meaningful. You can hand out flyers all over the place, but if you know the person, you're going to be much more successful in communication. And again, you're the expert on that, my girl. And we see the benefits of having access to the World Wide Web, but medicine is still very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Just like politics can be local, medicine is personal. I mean, it's probably the most important conversations you'll ever have is with your doctor.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
and that is where we have the Holy Spirit to help us say the right words,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a profound honor to take care of people when they need you the most.
Yeah. It's a
So
beautiful
anything
way of
else?
looking at it.
It is. And the rest of my family, I'm so proud. My brother is a Juilliard trained classical pianist who's been a musician his whole life. He has a
Wow.
fantastic band. He went to Jersey City State, but he loves St. Peter's and went to Xavier High School. But he's has a band called Jersey Sound, which is a
Oh, that's
phenomenal
awesome.
70s, 60s, 70s, 80s rock band. And they perform all over the state. They're wonderful. And my older sister Mary is an artist, and she was a fine arts teacher for many years. Also, so talented and gifted, and so raising her five beautiful children to be successful. And that's what we like to bring it home to the house and teach your children.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my mother, who was so brilliant. Her years at home with us was so important in training our imaginations and learning about fairy tales and legends and
Yeah.
mythology and Bible stories and the saints. You need to teach your children an imagination,
Mhm.
because that is the basis, as Einstein said, of brilliance. It's imagination and fantasy. So
Mhm.
kind of a family. I myself am proud and honored to have two boys, two sons. I'm
Oh,
married
that's
to
amazing.
I'm married to the greatest man in the world. I don't know if you're married yet, but I already have the greatest guy. And he is Dr. Stephen Hall. He went to USC and trained out of Harlem and Columbia Presbyterian. He's the chief of plastic surgery at the medical center. We met as residents at the Jersey City Medical Center, which is probably the least romantic place to meet your beloved after 72 hours on call with your mascara on your chin. But we managed to still make it work, and we've been married now for 37 years,
Wow,
and we work
that's
together. We have an
beautiful.
oncoplastic. I do the breast cancer operations, and he does the reconstructions. So we have like a family-based practice, which is ideal for working mom because we
Mhm.
cover each other all the time. And our sons, again, so proud of them. Our son John is bringing us a new grandbaby, our first in the
Oh,
fall. Yeah, it's
congratulations.
really exciting. I'm so
I'm
happy to
really
tell.
happy for
I'm sure
you.
this will be top front and center at this whole review. But this baby's coming in, and both he and his wife went to graduate from Scranton, University of Scranton, Jesuit trained and faith based. And John got his master's in medical ethics from Drew, and then a master's in marketing from Rutgers. And I'm just couldn't be prouder. He's also a phenomenal saxophone player.
Wow,
And
you have
my
a lot
young
to be proud of.
Yes, and my younger son also his masters. He went to Centenary University. He was a ranked 26th in the country as a heavyweight wrestler in college. Was also an all-star baseball, not baseball, football and wrestling in high school. But he is now a professional bass player, and he
Wow.
is. And they have a rock band called Running Late. But Mike is now on his own, and if you want to follow Mike Hall.bass, listen to him. You'll love him. I want
Will
to
do.
bring his music to St. Peter's. He's,
Absolutely.
we're so proud. Our lives are enriched by our families and by our faith.
Mhm. How
And when
has
you,
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know, like it. How has I guess just the Jesuit education that St. Peter's gives specifically, how is that like rooting in Jesuit values like impacted your education and just your life in general?
Well, I think the Jesuits have been unique in their emphasis on education, not only in the arts and sciences and in the arts, in literacy, but in faith.
Mm,
And the faith in God and faith in the power of God is an enormous survival skill when you're, no matter what age you are, whether you're young and saying your prayers with your parents, hopefully, or saying your prayers when you hear thunder on your own when you're a child. Prayer is not only comforting, it is strengthening because
mm,
it enables you to look away from fear towards strength and light. Fear and anxiety are probably the most crippling aspects of our world. And
yeah.
millions of people suffer with anxiety and depression. I'm not being silly and simplistic and saying that faith alone can move mountains,
Mm,
but guess what? It really can. It can be an enormous survival and coping skill in a very uncertain world. So the
yeah.
Jesuits' basis on faith and St. Peter's was so great is that you had to take a course in religion every semester. And I hate to
Mm,
say it, those courses were phenomenal. I took
yeah.
Saint John's Gospel with Father Buckley, and when you study the Bible and you study the stories that we hear, Christmas and all the other lovely stories, Easter and the rest, you gotta live it. You gotta realize that your faith is what keeps you relevant because it's not just a blind, and the Jesuits were never blind followers of anything. They were
Yeah.
creators, innovators, inventors. They were the ones that were always looking for opportunities to expand and improve the influence of the faith. And you can do that through knowledge. And
Yeah.
there is no dichotomy between science and God. This is the same God is of us all, scientists and non-scientists. So I
Mm,
think it's that fearless ability to embrace faith in a real sense, in a real modern world, and to use it as a basis to live your life. Because, and ultimately, and my dad was always very important teaching to us that the goal of life is the beatific vision. You have to live a life you're proud of, and
Yeah.
you want God to be proud of you. You don't want to pass on with a good deed not done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important. It takes us out of the selfishness and narcissism that many materialistic philosophies embrace, and it brings us to something other. And when you're dealing with something other, all of a sudden your own problems are not quite as profoundly depressing, because we always have
Yeah.
something to help somebody else. But the Jesuits, again, they have their own, and you know it because you've been through it now for 4 years. I just wish there were thousands and thousands of more of them, because I
Yeah.
know they're like an endangered species. We have to keep cultivating
It's
those Jesuits.
true.
But
We're really lucky.
we are very blessed. And a faith-based education, no matter how fancy and educated you get, the faith remains
Mm-hmm.
if you're lucky.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so valuable how many people go to college and are able to leave with this just like powerful grounding that goes beyond just like knowledge.
And you'll see too, Loretta, that as you go on in life, you may find yourself not going to church as often. But as soon as
Mm.
you have those babies, you're going to be saying your prayers and going to the preface and the communion and the compliment. And you know something? It brings you back as an adult to your roots. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm praying that these new families, and we do see the communions coming out now after COVID, but these beautiful, loving children with the rosaries. Be amazed how many people still walk around with rosaries. You think it's your Aunt Granny or somebody, but it's really not. And whether you call them like mantra beads or whatever you want to call them, it's comforting.
Mm-hmm.
And we need comfort in this world. We need
Yeah,
peace. We need
absolutely.
comfort and peace.
Especially now.
That's
That's
right.
so true.
So anyway, Loretta, how many people do you have to interview, you poor child? You'll be exhausted, but you graduate soon, so you're almost out of there.
Yeah. I don't know. We didn't even get a number, but I've been really just learning so much from everyone so far and so much from you. I've really been enjoying this
Well, thank
conversation.
you. And I'm enjoying you, my dear. So, as a matter of fact, one of the biggest challenges to our generation was becoming computer literate. And, the Zoom thing, like, can you hear me? Are you there? Like the seance thing. It's very interesting. But we can learn. And that's another thing that Jesuits teach you. Just keep trying. My dad always
Yeah,
said, too, if you could pass one test, you could pass every test. So, don't give up on yourself.
that's good
Be
advice.
confident. Another good advice I got at St. Peter's was I went to my first calculus class, and all of my students, my co-students were young men from St. Peter's prep graduates. And then they all got 97s and I got like a 20. So I went up to the professor and I said, I know I'm smart, but you have to help me with this. You could
Yeah.
approach the patient like, I'm not taking this lying down.
Yeah.
I'm missing something someplace. And they were always willing to help. Always willing. Well, let's sit down and figure where your brain turned off, during this test. But
Mhm.
they made you really believe in yourself. And
Yeah.
you believe in God and yourself, you're pretty much okay. So,
Yeah, that's kind of all you need.
that's kind of what else do you need? So anyway, darling, anything else that I need to hit?
Um, well, can you tell me a little bit about you mentioned a little bit about the 60s, but how did kind of the larger societal issues of that time like affect St. Peter's and the St. Peter's community while you were on campus?
Well, we had a pretty diverse population at that time. In terms of course, the demographics of Jersey City have changed so much in the past 30 years. I mean, we've had a lot more. When I was there were a lot of Cuban exiles, uh,
Mhm.
and these were extraordinarily hardworking, successful students, and those are the ones that took most of the valedictorian spots because they knew what freedom meant, and they knew that this was their time to embrace democracy and live the life they had imagined that they could no longer imagine in a communist country. So we had a large population of Cuban refugees. and they were phenomenal. There was some still were residents with me in surgery and were inspiration to me because their families had a lot and they ended up with nothing. And this next gen, and the parents worked menial jobs to send their kids to college and up to a Catholic Jesuit school. And these kids were inspirations to me. We also had very talented, because remember, it's an urban environment. So we have African-American students, we had Asian students, we had a lot of Filipino students. We had whatever was coming in Jersey City. Obviously my dad's generation was the Irish, the Italians, the Polish, and a lot of Jewish kids went to St. Peter's too. My father's best friend was Dr. Vigurski. He was a dentist in Jersey City for decades, but he was his best buddy. And so, all these ethnic populations would go to St. Peter's. I had a lot of Jewish friends that went over to Rome with me from St. Peter's. So we had, we celebrated everything. And we our friends embraced different cultures and different histories. The political turmoil at the time was tough because, remember, the draft was still in place. Education was even more important because if you were not in college, you were in Vietnam. So there was tremendous competition for spots in medical school, for spots in college. It was a tough time to be young. It was wonderful because, again, the rock music was awesome. But Led Zeppelin, all these great, but Joni Mitchell, all these great protest songs at the time. But the culture of the 60s and the early 70s was very volatile. And I know when we started having the Vietnam protests on campus, there was a lot of backlash from the community because, again, this is urban communities tend to be kind of conservative. Usually they have, old country values and expectations. So the long-haired hippies and the flower children and all the rest of it, and those urban studies majors, those crazy kids, they were kind of like, little unicorns in the backyard, but important because it inspired all of us to think about what the heck was going on. And I think college has to do that. You have to stop being just parochial and look at the global implications of what are going on, because what does happen in politics is not just local, it is global and it affects everybody. So I remember at that time, I was really worried about my younger brother because, granted, the draft was something, it's granted, and we love our military and pray for them. And whenever I see one, I try to give him $20 just to say, buy yourself a beer or something, because these kids sacrifice so much now because we don't have the draft. And they're doing the job of people that otherwise would be right next to them. So they deserve special. And again, St. Peter's has done a lot for the veterans. One of our best friends came out of the Vietnam War and went back to St. Peter's and got his MBA at night while working. And he's also very grateful to St. Peter's for the opportunity. Very successful executive in PSENG. But these kids, these were our friends that were going off to war. And there was a lot of anger and frustration with what we were doing there. And again, we can have that debate till the cows come home. And I still wonder what the hell we were doing over there. But pardon my French. But the issue of social activism and civil rights activism and women's rights activism. I mean, I think because St. Peter's was by and large very embracing, we didn't have quite as much anger and hatred towards St. Peter's because we could say what we wanted. We were not censored. We were not shut down. I mean, we had to behave ourselves, for God's sake. We couldn't throw Molotov cocktails at the Swan Song, but the point is, there was a lot of social unrest because of the draft. And that actually influenced a lot of us going to medical school in Rome, because at the time, St. Peter's has always had a very successful pre-med program. Almost everyone that finishes goes on to either medical school, nursing school, dental school, or some other health profession. But at that time, because there was such an incredible number of applications, there weren't enough spots. So a bunch of us got together. We went over to the Italian consulate and we said, well, let's do this. And it's crazy because none of us spoke Italian, but we figured, what the heck? Let's go to Italy. And right. That's what you do when you're young. You don't even think about what you're doing other than, yeah, let's do that. We want to be doctors. Let's do it. And every single one of them got through. Some transferred back, but all of them got their MDs, and many of them are still practicing in our area. And we were able to get there and back and do it safely and do it proudly. And I always thought it doubly ironic that my father, the child of immigrants from Italy, went to Georgetown Medical School, and me, the daughter of the Georgetown Medical School, ended up going to Italy. And I'm eternally grateful to them too, because not only did they bring my family over here, but they took me back over there. So
Yeah, wow.
talk about irony.
What a
It's kind of
circle.
crazy. It is a circle. Life is a circle. Not to quote
Absolutely.
Disney, but anyway. Anyway, we've had a lot of fun, and I hope people understand the history of St. Peter's, and I want to learn more about the future of St. Peter's, because the mission remains critical to educate people in the Jesuit tradition in an urban environment that not only impacts their personal success, but the community enrichment, because that is the Jesuit vision of God in the community. And we all become disciples in some way, not by preaching, but by our lives, I hope. By our hope.
Still the
So
work
you
that
will
they're
do the
doing
same.
today.
You
Yeah,
will
I
do
hope
the
so.
same. And I wish you luck when you're the editor of the New York Times, if it's still existing in
Yeah.
10 years. But what are your plans, sweetheart? Are you going to travel, or what are you going to do?
Hopefully, I hope to become a journalist and maybe be able to travel through work. That would be really nice, but
I think
we'll
that's good.
see.
St. Peter's was able to offer opportunities for travel. When I was in sophomore year, I got a grant at the American Museum of Natural History in
Wow.
invertebrate physiology. Strangely enough, they called me the crab queen at St. Peter's at my lab table. That was very insulting, but I took it. I took it anyway, and I ended up going to Bimini, to the British West Indies, to do research on
Wow.
sharks and land crabs. I mean, St. Peter's offers. You just have to be aware. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
I traveled to Denmark for $200. We had such great college trips.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh. It's amazing.
but the best part really was they took a personal interest in each one of us. They knew our names. They knew if we didn't show up. They knew that we had to be responsible for ourselves, and they gave us opportunities for growth that we wouldn't have imagined.
Yeah.
So I
I've had that
thank you.
experience too.
I really thank you, darling, for an opportunity for me to go down memory lane and think of all the fun we had, and to be grateful to St. Peter's, and I'm just wishing them the next 150 years of happy graduates
Absolutely.
that are doing our best to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
So you be well,
you.
gorgeous girl. Congratulations.
Thank you so
You
much.
could throw a hat in the air, I would. But you be well, and let me know if this comes out. I'd love to see if I made the cut.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I had the best time talking to you.
Thanks, sweetheart. God bless.
I'm really going to carry this with me. Have a nice day.
You too, darling. Bye.
Bye.